Sex in the City, Chapter 2. The next few weeks were spent straightening out the apartment and going to work. Neither Alice or Charles saw many of the other occupants of the block, and when they did, it was in the underground car park as people went to and from work. They bumped into Catherine and Robert a few times and met the other two couples who lived in the apartments on their floor. The other couples were Michael and Lucy, who were of similar age to themselves. Michael was an early bird and would get up each morning at 5 to go for a run, coming back about 6 as Charles was heading out for work. Lucy was a school teacher in the local primary school and often came home carrying home a pile of books for marking. They knew less about the other couple who lived on their floor, John and Gwen. John appeared to work shifts as his hours were odd. As far as they could tell, he was currently working nights. Gwen had told Alice one day in the lift that she worked in a local accountant's office. Coming home from work one Monday night, Alice bumped into Catherine. "Hi Alice, that's another day over, soon be the weekend," laughed Catherine. "Tell me about it. I feel like all we do these days is wish our lives away. They should bring in a 3-day weekend," Alice replied. "What a good idea. Listen, I am glad I bumped into you this evening. What are you doing on Saturday night?" asked Catherine. "Nothing planned at the moment." "Why?" questioned Alice. "Well, Robert and I were thinking about having a little dinner party and wondered if you would like to come," said Catherine. "Nothing fancy, just a meal and a few drinks. We were thinking about inviting a few others from the block, and it would be a good way for you to meet some of the other residents." "What a lovely thought. Yes, we will come. I will let Charles know this evening." "Do you want us to bring anything, and what's the dress?" asked Alice. "Oh, just bring a bottle of wine and yourselves. I suppose dress-wise, casual. It will just be a small gathering at our apartment after all." Alice felt pleased to be invited to the party. She felt that it meant that they had been accepted into the community. It would be nice to get to really know the neighbors, and even nicer that she now had something to look forward to rather than just work. She told Charles when he got in and immediately started looking through her wardrobe for something to wear. Charles wandered into the bedroom and watched her. "You're going to say you have nothing to wear in a minute, aren't you?" She looked at him. "Well, I haven't, and we need to make an impression. I realize that you would just go in jeans and a t-shirt, but these are our new neighbors. I don't want them thinking I am just some poor girl from the sticks." "Oh, I am sure they wouldn't think that, and besides, you look good in anything, even naked," laughed Charles. "Well, that is certainly not going to happen, although if I don't find anything suitable soon." Alice left the sentence hanging. Charles sighed and said, "Well, let me know once you have found something. I am going to go with trousers and a shirt." He wandered back into the living room and threw himself on the leather sofa, switched on the TV and started flicking through the sports channels. After 30 minutes, Alice came out to show him what she had settled on. It was a little black dress which finished high up on her thigh, but was covered in lace which saw the hem drop to her knees. The lace effect also worked all the way down her arms, and the dress had a high neckline. On her feet, she had gone for simple silver stroppy sandals with a 4-inch heel. "Well, what do you think?" she asked. "What do I think? I think I am going to have to rethink what I am going to wear. But you look stunning." He made a grab for her, but she danced out of his way. "Do you think so? It's not too short, too tardy?" "Definitely not. Besides, if you've got it, show it off," said Charles, winking at her. Alice looked at Charles, annoyed. I would rather not show it all off to our neighbors. Oh, come on Alice, no kids live here, and we are all attractive couples who live in this block. Even the couple who must be nearing their 60s are pretty good looking considering their age. Of course, you should flaunt it. Charles was teasing her and she knew it. She turned and looked out of the window. You know I am no prude, but these are our neighbors, and I want to be able to look them in the face, not get all embarrassed. She paused and then turned quickly to face him. What do you mean pretty good looking for their age? Have you been checking the women out who live in this block? Am I not good enough for you? Have you gone off me? Charles held his hands up in defense. Slow down. Of course, I have not gone off you, but I can still admire beautiful things. He winked and had a cheeky grin on his face. Besides, I have checked out all the competition and can declare that you are by far the best looking and fittest bird living on this block. You sexist pig, Alice said, but the annoyance had gone and she was laughing. Charles tried to look all innocent. Do you know anything about the couple who live next to us on that side? Who? John and Gwen? No, not really, said Alice. I have bumped into them a couple of times in the lift on the way to work but not really had time to talk to them. Why? Well, their bedroom is obviously at the front. I have stood out on the balcony a couple of times just before going to bed, and you can clearly hear them when they are shagging. It is very erotic. Oh, said Alice, is that why you keep coming to bed in a very amorous mood? Well, said Charles, coming up behind Alice and wrapping his arms around her, tea has certainly helped get me all hot under the collar. Silence fell in the room. Alice was both curious and embarrassed to ask more about what he had heard. Charles' next words allowed her to hide her curiosity when he suggested that as the weather was warm outside they should spend more time eating al fresco and enjoying the summer breeze, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. Despite the weather being lovely and warm for the rest of the week, unfortunately, the couple next door did not have any nocturnal fun which they could listen to. Saturday morning came around, and Charles and Alice started the weekend with the usual routine of going to the gym, then spending the rest of the day at the local shopping center browsing around the shops and drinking coffee. In the evening both got ready and made the short journey down the stairs to Catherine and Robert's apartment. The door was answered by Robert, who welcomed them in and admired Alice's dress. Robert was about 6 feet and clearly worked out as his broad shoulders and chest showed. He was dressed in black jeans and a white shirt, which caused Charles to comment on how he felt slightly overdressed having opted to wear a black suit with a white shirt without a tie. Robert told him not to worry and he considered it a compliment that they had clearly made an effort and ushered them into the living room to meet the other guest who had already arrived. Catherine came over and kissed both Alice and Charles on the cheeks. She was dressed in a tight, figure-hugging, red, sleeveless dress which started at the neck with a wide collar. As it progressed down, it split so that the material crossed over her ample breasts just to the right side of her nipples and showed off her cleavage to the full. It was clear to Charles and all there that Catherine was not wearing a bra. The dress continued over her flat stomach and shapely arse to finish just above the knee. She had finished off the look with a pair of red, high-heel stroppy shoes. "Guys, delighted that you have made it. Let me introduce you to everyone." She took Alice by the arm and led her over to a couple who were sitting on a leather sofa similar to the one they had in their apartment. "Alice, Charles, this is Michelle and Richard. They live downstairs directly below us. Michelle, Richard, this is Alice and Charles, who live directly above us. You could call us the filling-in-a couple sandwich. Michelle and Richard stood up, and they all exchanged handshakes and kisses. Richard was dressed in a pair of trousers and a red shirt, whilst Michelle had on a black Bardot neck wide-legged jumpsuit. The low sweep of the neckline coupled with Michelle's ample breasts made a striking image. Catherine then introduced them to the other couple. I believe you already know Michael and Lucy. Yes, we have bumped into one another a few times, said Lucy. Charles quickly looked Lucy up and down. Wish we could bump into one another more often, he thought. Lucy had a black and white striped short dress on, with over-the-knee, black suede boots showing off her toned legs to their fullest. Charles and Alice followed Catherine into the kitchen area and opened one of the 2 bottles of Prosecco they had bought with them. Pouring themselves each a glass, they returned to the group who were in the middle, listening to how Michael and Lucy had met. We met at uni, through friends of friends. You know how it is, said Lucy. We lost contact after we both graduated and then about 5 years later bumped into one another on a night out. I was on a teacher's night out at the end of the school year, and Michael was on a stag do. If I am honest, he was pretty much worse for wear that night, but the next day he got in contact and asked if I wanted to go for a drink, and the rest, as they say, is history. Michael interrupted at this point. It was more like early evening on the next day. I was definitely the worse for wear the next day, and it took me until early evening for everything to stop hurting and to stop wanting to throw up. I was a complete wreck. If I am honest, I wanted to stay in and just sleep, but I couldn't get Lucy out of my mind and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss my chance with her. He looked at Lucy. Guess it was the right thing to do. Lucy smiled and leaned in and gave him a quick kiss. Still all loved up. Guys, get a room, Catherine laughed. So now we have heard the life story of these 2. What about you guys? How did you meet? Charles and Alice looked at one another. Well, it's nothing like long-lost love, said Charles. I had gone out for a few drinks one Saturday night and ended up in a nightclub. I got a drink from the upstairs bar and then went and stood at the rail looking down at the dance floor. I happened to stand next to Alice, and we got chatting. I was at the club with a friend. We had just come off the dance floor, and she said he looks nice, go talk to him, and then pushed me into Charles, Alice added. Well, we had known one another from school. We lived on the same street and our parents were friends, said Michelle. It took a bit of time as we both had other boyfriends and girlfriends, but we were friends and always confided in one another and picked one another up after breakups, so guess it was just going to happen. Bit like the film When Harry Met Sally, said Charles. Never seen it, said Michelle. This caused consternation amongst the group. You have never seen When Harry Met Sally, cried Catherine. It's a classic. Everyone knows about the orgasm scene. Michelle shook her head no. Catherine continued, can men and women ever just be friends? It's the whole premise of the film, you will have to watch it. Oh, yes, 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 everyone turned and looked at Lucy, who had her eyes closed and was banging her hand down on the sofa. She stopped, looked at everybody and smiled. I will have what she is having, laughed Alice. Michelle laughed as well. I am now completely confused. I assume that is part of the film. Is it? Oh yes, said Robert, coming across from the kitchen area. Very sexy, Lucy, but I am going to have to interrupt the sex show to ask everybody to take their seats at the table as we are ready to serve up. Everybody moved across to the dining table and sat down. Charles and Alex sat down on one side opposite Michelle and Richard. Lucy and Michael sat to their right, leaving the hosts logically to sit on their left nearest the kitchen so that they could continue to monitor the progress of the main course. Robert and Catherine brought the starters out. Does anyone require a top-up? Asked Catherine, jumping back up. We are terrible hosts. Bringing the bottles back to the table, she topped up everybody's glasses, leaning over the table, clearly showing her cleavage to Lucy and Michael. Lucy looked down the smooth, white valley between the two mountains which were straining to be released from her dress. Michael glanced but did not want to offend Catherine, or more importantly Lucy, so he refocused on the glass and the wine bottle. With everybody's glass now refilled and the starters in front of them, they all started to eat and the conversation slowed, revolving around work and recent news events. Catherine was pleased with how things were going so far, and whilst the guest might not know it, this dinner party was about testing the waters with some of the fellow occupants of the block for future more risque parties that they occasionally held. Michelle and Richard were going to take some work as Michelle seemed pretty shy, timid even, but she certainly had a good body, and whether she knew it or not, her choice of outfit had been a good one. Michael clearly didn't want to upset Lucy, as could be seen by his reaction when she had leaned across the table to pour more wine, but Lucy certainly seemed game for anything. Catherine was not sure of Lucy's sexuality yet, but it was going to be fun teasing it out of her, and she was certainly up for fun. The fake orgasm had been perfectly timed, and it had got her all horny. She didn't expect any fun from tonight's little gathering, but Lucy might be up for it. Catherine turned her attention to Charles and Alice. Charles clearly worked out, and the suit was showing off his shoulders and chest beautifully. Oh, she would dearly love to unwrap him, and Robert would relish feasting on Alice's petite body. Catherine loved watching Robert lick and tease a woman to orgasm before slowly pushing his cock into their tight wet pussies. She did sometimes wonder if there was something warped about her love of seeing her husband fuck other women and his love of watching another man take her. Catherine was lost in thought for a while till Robert placed his hand on her leg and kissed her neck. "Penny for them?" he asked. "Nothing, tell you later," she replied, leaning her head into him. Robert kept his hand on her thigh and slowly started to stroke it. Each time he moved up her thigh, he gradually raised the hem of her dress till his hand was stroking the bare flesh of her thigh. His hand stroked the soft skin, gently moving up her leg with each upward stroke till it was at the top of her leg, his finger stroking across the silk panties covering her pussy. Catherine shuddered and opened her legs slightly wider. She looked across at the rest of the dinner guests. Nobody seemed to have noticed, but she realized that they would have to stop. Otherwise one of the others would, and she didn't think the guests were ready for that just yet. Pushing Robert's hand away, she surreptitiously pulled her dress back down to more modest levels. "Right, Robert, clear the plates away, and I will check up on the main course."